The Ritz-Carlton ballroom shimmered with 1,000 points of light. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed illumination over 200 guests in black tie and evening gowns. White orchids and silver eucalyptus draped every surface. The scene was perfect, meticulously designed, outrageously expensive, and completely surreal to me. I watched from behind a service door, my heart thundering so violently I feared it might bruise my ribs. The catering uniform I'd borrowed felt stiff against my skin. Up at the altar, Mason Kingsley, my husband of 8 years, stood tall and handsome in a custom tuxedo. His strong jaw was freshly shaved, his dark hair perfectly styled. He looked happier than I'd seen him in years. Beside him, his best friend Julian whispered something that made him laugh. The string quartet transitioned to Pachelbel's canon. Guests rose to their feet, turning expectantly toward the grand entrance. And there she was, Elise, floating down the aisle in a cloud of white silk and lace. Her perfect smile. Her perfect skin. Her perfect life, my life. The minister began with a practiced, resonant voice. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today." I closed my eyes briefly, letting the surreal nature of the moment wash over me. My husband was marrying another woman. And everyone, our friends, his family, our colleagues, everyone thought I was dead, because that's what Mason had told them. My fingers tightened around the small device in my pocket. One button press and everything would change. One button press and I would exist again. I had spent 2 years planning this moment. 2 years of grief, rage, and painstaking preparation. I stepped through the service door, my borrowed heels silent against the plush carpet. In the corner of the room, a massive screen had been set up for a special video tribute. Mason's surprise gift to his bride, but I had a different surprise in mind. If anyone can show just 'cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony. Let them speak now or forever hold their peace. My finger pressed the button. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life, and there I was, looking directly into the camera, very much alive. "Hello, Mason," my recorded self said calmly. Surprise. 18 months earlier. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday. Stage 4 ovarian cancer. Terminal. I sat across from Dr. Whitman, clutching Mason's hand as if it were the only solid thing in a world suddenly turned to quicksand. His face had drained of all color. His normally confident posture collapsed inward. "How long?" Mason asked, his voice barely audible. "Without aggressive treatment, 6 months. With everything we can throw at it, perhaps a year. Maybe a bit longer." Dr. Whitman's voice was gentle but clinical. "I'm so sorry, Natalie." I nodded numbly, unable to process the information. At 34, I had been planning our future, not my funeral. The drive home passed in silence. Mason stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I stared out the window, watching Seattle's familiar landscape blur past, wondering how many more times I would see it. "We'll fight this," Mason finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "Whatever it takes. Second opinions. Clinical trials. Anything." His determination should have comforted me. Instead, it left me hollow. Mason had always been a fixer, a corporate attorney who specialized in making problems disappear. But he couldn't litigate against my failing body. The next months became a blur of hospitals and treatments. Chemotherapy ravaged what strength I had left. I lost my hair, then 20 pounds, then my sense of taste. Mason hired the best home care nurses, consulted with oncologists across the country, and worked remotely to be with me. On the surface, he was the perfect husband, devoted, tireless, unwavering. But something wasn't right. It started with small things. Hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered a room. Late-night work emergencies that took him from our home for hours. The faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his collar, which he explained away as belonging to a client. I might have been dying, but I wasn't stupid. One evening, when Mason thought I was heavily sedated, I overheard him in his study. "I can't leave her now, Elise. You know that would look terrible." "Yes, I know we planned." It won't be much longer, the doctors say. The betrayal cut deeper than any surgical knife. While I fought for every additional day of life, my husband was planning his future with another woman. I should have confronted him. Should have screamed and demanded answers. But a strange calm settled over me instead, the kind that comes when you have nothing left to lose. The next day, I asked my nurse, Sophia, to help me sit up in bed. Sophia had become more than a caregiver. She was perhaps the only real friend I had left. Everyone else had gradually faded away, uncomfortable with the proximity of death. "I need to ask you something important," I said, once I was propped up against the pillows. "Something that stays between us." Sophia adjusted my blankets, her warm brown eyes concerned. "Of course, Natalie, anything. Do you know Elise Chambers? The museum curator Mason introduced at the benefit last year?" Sophia hesitated. "That was answer enough, please," I whispered. "I need to know." She sat on the edge of the bed. "There are rumors. At the hospital, people talk. I didn't want to upset you." I closed my eyes. "How long?" "I think almost a year. Before your diagnosis." Sophia took my hand. "Natalie, you should confront Mason. Even in your condition, you deserve—" "No," I said, suddenly very clear about what I wanted. "I have a different idea." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Mason was waiting for me to die, perhaps I should give him exactly what he wanted, just not in the way he expected. I called my college roommate, Caroline, now a successful doctor in Switzerland. We hadn't spoken in years, but she answered immediately. "I need your help," I told her. "And it's going to sound insane." 2 days later, I asked Mason to bring my laptop to the bedroom. I told him I wanted to update my will. Instead, I emptied our joint emergency account, $250,000 we'd saved for just in case. This qualified. When Sophia came for her night shift, she brought a small suitcase as I'd requested. Inside was a change of clothes, a wig similar to my pre-chemo hair, and forged medical documents Caroline had arranged. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Sophia asked, helping me dress. I was the weakest I'd ever been, but somehow also the strongest. "He's already mourning me, Sophia. He just doesn't know I'm aware of it." "What will you do?" "Where will you go?" "First, to get healthy again." I fastened the small gold locket around my neck, the one containing a picture of my parents, both long gone. "Then, I'm going to make sure Mason never forgets me." That night, with Sophia's help, Natalie Kingsley disappeared. 1 year later. Zurich embraced me like an old friend. The clean air, the gleaming lake, the distant Alps, all of it felt like a world away from the sick room I'd left behind. Caroline's connections had secured me both treatment and a new identity. Amelia Foster, Canadian expatriate. The cancer had nearly won, but a combination of experimental treatments, distance from the source of my heartbreak, and sheer spite had pulled me back from the brink. My hair had grown back, darker and curlier than before. I'd gained weight and muscle tone from daily walks along Lake Zurich. The woman who stared back at me from the mirror looked nothing like Natalie Kingsley, the pale ghost who had fled Seattle. Each morning, I checked the Seattle newspapers online. 3 months after my disappearance, they ran a small obituary. Natalie Kingsley, beloved wife of Mason Kingsley, had succumbed to cancer. A private service had been held. Donations could be made to the American Cancer Society. Mason hadn't wasted any time. 6 months after my death, a society page photo showed Mason at a charity gala, Elise Chambers on his arm. They made a striking couple, he in his tuxedo, she in a crimson gown that hugged every curve. Her hand rested possessively on his chest, a significant diamond glittering on her finger. I closed the laptop, a familiar ice crystallizing in my veins. Caroline found me on the balcony that evening, staring at the sunset over the lake. "You're torturing yourself," she said, handing me a glass of wine. "It's time to let go, build your new life. You've been given a second chance, Amelia." I sipped the wine. "That's not my name. It is now. Natalie is dead, remember? Only on paper." I turned to face her. I didn't fight so hard to live just to become someone else, Caroline. I fought to reclaim what was taken from me. Mason wasn't taken from you. He left. He betrayed you. Men like that don't deserve a second thought. This isn't about giving him a second thought. I tapped my finger against the wine glass. It's about making sure he never forgets his first wife. Caroline studied me. Concern etched across her face. What are you planning exactly? Justice, I said simply. Not revenge, justice. The next day, I contacted a private investigator in Seattle, using an encrypted email and payment through a series of offshore accounts Caroline had helped me establish. I needed information about Mason, about Elise, about their life together in what had once been my home. The reports came steadily over the next months. Mason had received a significant promotion at his law firm. He and Elise had moved into our lakeside house, though they'd redecorated extensively. They were fixtures in Seattle's social scene, more prominent than Mason and I had ever been. And then came the information I'd been waiting for. They had set a wedding date. The Ritz-Carlton, 200 guests, $500,000 in arrangements, the perfect society wedding. I booked a flight to Seattle the same day. When I returned to American soil, I did so as Catherine Wells, a distant cousin of Mason's deceased wife, coming to pay respects before the wedding. The story was just plausible enough, and with my changed appearance and the fact that Mason's family had rarely spent time with mine, the risk of recognition was minimal. I rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill and began surveillance. Mason and Elise kept predictable schedules. He left for work at 7:30 each morning. She split her time between their home and the Seattle Art Museum, where she had recently been promoted to Director of Modern Collections. Their home, my home, was protected by the same security system Mason had installed years ago. The same system whose codes I still remembered. 2 months before their wedding, I let myself in while they were at a weekend retreat in Portland. The house had been transformed. My warm, comfortable furnishings replaced with sleek, modern pieces. My photographs gone, my books removed, my existence erased. In Mason's home office, I found their wedding planning binder. Every detail meticulously arranged, down to the custom napkins and the surprise video tribute Mason was preparing for Elise, a tribute that celebrated their 3-year journey of love, a journey that had begun while I was still very much alive and married to him. I took photos of every page in that binder. Then I replaced it exactly as I'd found it and left, a plan forming in my mind. The final piece fell into place when I befriended a technical director at the Ritz-Carlton. A few strategic coffee dates, some well-placed compliments, and soon Thomas was sharing more than just conversation. He showed me the hotel's AV setup, explained how the system worked, gave me access to test my presentation for an upcoming corporate event. All I needed was the right moment to reveal the truth. The wedding day. "Hello, Mason," my recorded self said calmly. Surprise! The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned toward the screen where my face, very much alive, filled the frame. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Natalie Kingsley, Mason's wife, his first wife. The one he told you all had died of cancer. Mason stood frozen at the altar, his face a mask of disbelief. Beside him, Elise's perfect features contorted in confusion. You see, I continued on screen, I didn't die, I left. Because while I was fighting for my life, Mason here was planning his future with Elise. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mason's mother pressed a hand to her mouth. His father stood rigid with shock. I have evidence of everything. The affair that began long before my diagnosis. The plans they made while I was undergoing chemotherapy. The life insurance policy Mason took out just 3 months before I supposedly died. On cue, the screen split to show bank statements, text messages, photographs, all meticulously organized and displayed for everyone to see. Mason didn't just betray me as a husband. He committed fraud. He collected $2 million in life insurance for a death that never happened. The recording paused dramatically, and then I stepped out from behind the service door, into the light. The room erupted in gasps. Someone screamed. Mason stumbled backward as if he'd been physically struck. "Hello, everyone," I said, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. "Thank you for coming to my resurrection." Elise recovered first. "This is insane." "Security!" she called out, her voice shrill. "I wouldn't," I advised calmly. "Unless everyone here wants to be accessories to insurance fraud. The authorities have already been notified." This was a bluff, but a necessary one. Mason finally found his voice. "Natalie," he whispered, taking a step toward me. "You're alive. Disappointed?" I asked coolly. He shook his head, seemingly dazed. "How?" The doctor said I had months to live, and I might have if I'd stayed with you." "Stress and betrayal aren't exactly conducive to healing." Elise grabbed Mason's arm. "Who is this woman? She looks nothing like the pictures." "Cancer changes a person," I replied. "So does betrayal." Mason's father pushed through the crowd. "Is it really you, Natalie?" I softened slightly. "Robert Kingsley had always been kind to me." "Yes, Robert. It's me. Prove it," Mason demanded, finding his lawyer's voice. "Anyone could claim, 'You have a birthmark shaped like Texas on your left hip,'" I said loudly. "You're allergic to cinnamon. Your first dog was named Commander, but you called him Comma because you said he always paused in the middle of doing anything. You proposed to me at Alki Beach after we got caught in a rainstorm. And you said that even soaking wet and furious, I was the most beautiful woman you'd ever seen." The crowd had gone deathly silent. "You told me you'd love me until death parted us," I continued, my voice finally cracking. "I just didn't realize you were counting the minutes until it did." Mason looked desperate now. "Natalie, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I gestured around the lavish ballroom. "Explain why you told our friends I was dead." "Explain why you were sleeping with her while I was vomiting from chemo treatments." "Explain why you collected on my life insurance when you knew damn well I wasn't in that urn you buried." Elise turned to Mason, horror dawning on her face. "Insurance? Mason, what is she talking about?" I laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Oh, Elise, did you think you were special? That he wouldn't do to you what he did to me?" "Don't listen to her," Mason hissed, but his face had gone ashen. I pulled a folded document from my pocket and handed it to Robert. "This is a copy of the insurance claim Mason filed. $2 million for a wife who never died. That's fraud, by the way. Felony fraud." Mason lunged toward me then, his handsome face twisted with rage. "You bitch, you'll ruin everything." Julian caught him before he could reach me, restraining him with surprising strength. "Careful, Mason," I said, not backing away. Everyone's watching now, and indeed they were. 200 of Seattle's elite, witnessing the unraveling of Mason Kingsley's perfect facade. Elise had snatched the document from Robert's hands and was reading it, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury. "You lied to me," she said, her voice deadly quiet. "You said the down payment for our house came from your bonus." "Elise, baby, I can explain." "Don't baby me." She ripped the diamond ring from her finger and threw it at his chest. "You told me she died in your arms, that you held her until the end." "He was holding something, all right," I interjected. "Just not me." 2 uniformed police officers appeared at the ballroom entrance. I hadn't actually called them. That had been Thomas's contribution when I'd finally told him the full story. "Mr. Kingsley?" One called out. "We'd like to ask you some questions about an insurance claim." Mason's eyes darted around the room, calculating, assessing, looking for escape. Finding none, his shoulders slumped in defeat. As the officers approached, I stepped closer to him, close enough that only he could hear me. "I didn't come back for the money. Mason, I came back so you would know what it feels like to have the life you planned ripped away in an instant. To realize that everything you believed was a lie." Something flickered in his eyes, regret, perhaps, or simply fear. "I did love you once," he whispered. "That's the tragedy," I replied. "I never stopped loving you. Not until I had to pretend to be dead to discover the truth." I stepped back as the officers reached us, watching as they led Mason away. The perfect wedding dissolved into chaos around me. Guests talking over each other, Elise sobbing into her mother's shoulder, photographers documenting every moment of the spectacular disaster. Robert Kingsley approached me cautiously. "Natalie, I don't understand. Where have you been? Why didn't you tell us you were alive?" "Because I needed to get well first. And because I needed to know who Mason really was." I touched his arm gently. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Are you really pressing charges?" I shook my head. "That will be up to the insurance company. And Elise, I suppose, since half that money went into what was supposed to be her marital home." He nodded slowly, processing. "What will you do now?" It was the first time anyone had asked me that question, the first time I'd asked it of myself. For 2 years, my existence had been defined by illness, then by Mason's betrayal, then by my plan for justice. Now, standing in the wreckage of what would have been Mason's new beginning, I realized I was free to create my own. "Live," I said simply. "I'm going to live." 6 months later, the Geneva sun warmed my face as I sat at the lakeside cafe, watching boats glide across the water. My cappuccino had gone cold, forgotten as I worked on my laptop. "Is this seat taken?" I looked up to find Sophia standing there, her warm smile just as I remembered it. "It is now," I said, gesturing for her to join me. She sat down, studying my face. "You look amazing, Natalie. Healthy. Catherine, actually. At least legally." I closed my laptop. "Thank you for coming all this way. Are you kidding? After everything we went through together. Besides, I had to see for myself that you were really okay." A waiter approached, and Sophia ordered an espresso. When he'd gone, she leaned forward eagerly. "So, tell me everything." The news only covered the basics: Mason's arrest, the insurance fraud charges, the wedding disaster. "But what happened after?" I smiled. The media frenzy had been intense but mercifully brief. Another scandal quickly replaced ours in the news cycle. Mason took a plea deal. Paid back the insurance money plus penalties. He'll serve 18 months, probably less, with good behavior. And Elise? Last I heard, she sold the house, my house, and moved to New York. Apparently, the Seattle art scene had too many uncomfortable memories. Sophia shook her head in wonder. "And you? Living in Switzerland permanently now?" "For the time being." I gestured to my laptop. "I've been writing. My story, but as a novel. Changing names, certain details. That's actually perfect. It's healing," I corrected. "Cheaper than therapy." We both laughed, then fell into a comfortable silence watching the lake. "Do you regret it?" Sophia finally asked. "The way you confronted him?" It was pretty dramatic. I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary, but not that I did it." "And the cancer? Are you in remission?" I touched the small scar on my collarbone where my port had once been. 2 years now. Not completely out of the woods, but the prognosis is good. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so glad, Natalie. Catherine. Whatever you want to be called." "I'm still figuring that out," I admitted. "Who I want to be, now that I don't have to be anyone's wife or anyone's patient." "That sounds like the best kind of problem to have." The waiter returned with Sophia's espresso. As she stirred in a packet of sugar, she asked casually, "Have you thought about contacting Mason? Now that everything's settled?" I shook my head firmly. "That chapter is closed. You know he's tried to find you." His mother reached out to me. "Apparently he's been asking about you from prison." Something twisted in my chest. Not pain, exactly, but a phantom echo of it. Let him wonder. The way I had to wonder about him and Elise. Sophia nodded, not pushing further. My phone chimed with a message. Dr. Laurent, confirming my checkup appointment the next day. Just routine, but a reminder that some battles were never completely won. "I should get going," Sophia said, glancing at her watch. "My flight back leaves tonight." We stood, and she pulled me into a fierce hug. "Promise you'll stay in touch this time," she whispered. "No more disappearing acts, I promise." And I meant it. After we said our goodbyes, I remained at the cafe, reopening my laptop. On the screen was the final chapter of my manuscript, the ending still unwritten. My phone chimed again. A different message this time from Caroline. Dinner tonight? Brought the research you asked for. The research, information about clinical trials for recurrent ovarian cancer. Not for me, but for the foundation I was establishing. A foundation that would help women access the kind of experimental treatments that had saved my life, particularly those women whose support systems had failed them. I typed a quick reply. 7 p.m., bringing the champagne. Then I turned back to my manuscript and began to write the ending. Not the one I'd planned, where justice was served and the story neatly concluded, but a more honest one. One where justice was messy and incomplete, where healing was ongoing, where the protagonist discovered that surviving was just the beginning of her story, not the end of it. In the distance, a ferry crossed the lake, carrying people from one shore to another. Just as I had crossed from Natalie to Catherine, from victim to survivor, from a woman defined by betrayal to one defined by her own choices. I had come to Geneva seeking an ending to my story with Mason. What I found instead was the beginning of a different story altogether. My story. Finally, truly mine.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.